Hey kids, thanks for joining me in the garage again. Today we're going to be working on the 66 Rambler. I've got a carburetor rebuild kit here that we're going to put together that I got from Mike's Carburetor Parts. And so we got to get the carburetor off the car and then get it over here on the table so we can take it apart and get it all rebuilt. So stick with me here, like, subscribe, comment down below. You can always follow me on Instagram at Weekend Wrench Turner and now on TikTok at Weekend Wrench Turner. See you in just a second. So you can see here I got this rebuild kit from Mike's Carburetor Parts. I got the deluxe kit, I think it was, which has a new float, a brass float. The 1940s have like a plastic one that tend to break and then start leaking. So this has everything we need in it. Like I said, float and a bunch of gaskets, needle, all sorts of stuff. So we're gonna get this thing off of the car here. We're going to open up these kits, see what's in them, and then go through, get everything torn apart and rebuilt. So let's go over to the car here. The beauty of working on these old cars is you only need a few, like a Phillips head, you know, maybe flathead screwdriver, a couple of wrenches. These things will come right off. So I'm going to pull the fuel hose out here and just leave that dangling. There's just two nuts on the side here. And then I'll have to pull a pin on this back side that releases the throttle from the throttle pedal. So and that's it. Just a pin, hose, little vacuum line that goes in right here, two nuts, and it's out. All right, let's go back over the bench here. With this back at the bench here, we're gonna start tearing it down before we open up the parts kit here. And just looking at this real quick, you can see I'm missing a screw right there. And so this could be part of the problem. But there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws in here. I only have 5. So let's go ahead and pull those 5 screws out. And this is a Holley model 1940. Now, one of the ways you can tell, and actually I sent Mike an email in order to make sure I'm getting the right one here. But on the, so you can see here the side with the vacuum, you can see there's kind of the writing on it. That's how you can tell the model. So the side with the linkage there, you can see there's a number stamped on this. This one's 7677. And so that's, you know, if you give that number over to Mike there at Mike's Carbs, he'll be able to tell you exactly which rebuild kit you're going to need. The next thing we're going to want to do, I think, okay, so this just comes apart once you've got that. I think before you do that, though, you're going to want to get some of these parts over here taken off. And so we'll leave it like that. What we want to do is get this screw off so we can get this, we'll actually get this little spring. So there's a spring, which is the spring to spring the accelerator back. Let's just move that up and over. That'll release that. And then we can kind of get that off of there. And then that as well. So this is the pump for the choke, which on mine, the choke is not doing anything right now. So get those two off. And then you can see here is the gasket. And you'll want to keep this gasket over to the side here because you want to make sure you get the right gasket. So I'm going to take this off in this fashion That way I know this will go, like this tab is up near, this is the, I believe the thermostat for the choke. So I'm going to set that aside there. And then let's take this screw off here, which this operates essentially, that's the accelerator pump. You can kind of see that. So when you really crank on it, this pumps, gives you a nice big squirt of fuel. And let's take this off of here and I'll show you. This thing is completely junk right now. So there's the accelerator pump, and just look at that piece of plastic on there. I mean, it's just gonzo. So kit comes with a new little piece of plastic and plunger here. So we'll replace that. It comes with a spring as well. We'll also replace that. But there's a little rubber gasket in here that you kind of have to get this little thing in order to get it out of there, kind of finagle it around a little bit. And this is kind of a little tricky. And so you can see that little grommet there came off with that bar. So, but that's okay. We're going to keep that on there so we kind of know where it was. I think, I don't know if the kit comes with a replacement for that, but I may have something that we can use to replace that. So, and then here in the float bowl, what we're going to do is there's a little spring that retains the float right there that you should be able to just kind of pull right out. There you are. And you can see the float here. And I think this was another part of my problem. Let me grab a wrench here. This end here is where the fuel comes in, and the needle sits on this. And I think my problem was that my fuel wasn't coming in. The kit comes with a replacement for this, so I can get it off. Excellent. So with that little spring and then this, needle here, I mean, it flows good. So I think maybe it probably wasn't quite set right. And so let's go ahead and we'll pull the float out. I think we're going to have to pull, there we go. So as you can see, there's the pin. These old, well, this is actually like a foam. I don't know if you can hear that. It's like a foam float, but we're going to replace this anyway. It's pretty nasty. So as you can see, the inside of this is pretty nasty. So you've got the accelerator jet and then another jet right there. Let's get a flathead screwdriver and we'll get down there. Yeah, and all the crud coming out of here. I think this is probably set for a while. You know, the other thing that's missing, I don't see the ball and weight, and that did not come out on the table here, and so that's completely missing too. So this thing, that's probably why this thing was just getting so flooded. So another thing, so this jet right down there, it's going to be really hard to see probably, but it has a little pin that sticks up, and so what I'm going to do here is just take a screwdriver and kind of cut a groove in it there. There we go. I think that might do the trick. Excellent. So that's out of there. Part, let me take this. This is the automatic choke. I think this thing was originally set up with a manual choke. So, all right, let's see if this will come off. Seems to be pretty well stuck in there. Oop. So that has a little spring there. Sits down in there. And then that spring just sits just like that. And then this little plastic piece is what, when you're pumping it, just gives a little bit of suction. This comes with a replacement part in the kit here. And so we'll be replacing that as well. So, got to be a little careful. Things will start springing out on you. So that was the accelerator, kind of the idle control. Over here is the idle mixture control. That is just next to that nut on the inboard, so you can kind of see the mixture. And also, we will get this nut off. That is a 3/8. That's just on there. It's a little kind of lock washer on the outside there. So we'll take that apart as well. And then a little kind of a rubber bushing that this spring sets in. So I don't know if the kit has one of those. I guess we'll find out here. So we'll keep that handy just in case. And then there's also some screws on the bottom here. This is the throttle plate. So yeah, here's the gasket as well. So we're going to want to replace that gasket. That'll go like that with this completely upside down. Here is the throttle. And it's got a little bit of play. Not too concerned about that. But we definitely want to get through here. There's a lot of little passages that we need to get in and get cleaned out. The idle air control, you know, we need to get cleaned out as well. And so the throttle blade there is not removable. They actually stake those little nuts. But I think I'll go in there, try to put a little bit of Vaporust on there, kind of get that cleaned up, and of course get this all scrubbed down and cleaned up real nice. Now somebody's got a, that's not quite the right screw, I would say, for that, huh? Tell you what, I've never rebuilt a carburetor, but I'm pretty sure wood screws and a welder are something that aren't in the tool bag for rebuilding a carburetor. I think I saw that on the internet somewhere. Well, I'm going to continue to struggle with this, but I think for the most part we can get the rest of this stuff. Oh, I do have this as well. Let's go ahead and pull this apart. I think this is the thermostat for the choke. Yeah, so there's a little bimetal spring in there that looks like goes through, hits this to adjust the choke depending on how hot or warm it is. So that's pretty interesting. That could be one big part of our problem. All right, we're back now. As you can see, I've had these sitting in some Evaporust overnight, actually. It's the next day. And so one of the things, I was kind of fiddling with this a little bit. And one of the things that you'll need to do, like on here, this is the piston for the power valve. And that was pretty much stuck. And so I've been able to free that up. And so you can see that moves in and out. And so I think that has gotten all cleaned up really well. It seems to move pretty freely. I think in the kits, I don't believe they have replacements for any of this. So you want to make sure to get it nice and clean so that you're able to reuse it. And so these are actually staked in. And so I think what I'm going to do now that I've got that in there really well cleaned up, seems to be moving like it should. I think I'm going to go ahead and re-stake that in there. To do that, I just have a punch and then my little brass hammer. I don't think it's going to take a lot to get that to stick down in there. But let's give it a go here. don't want to whack this too hard because you're sitting on top of this air cleaner screw, I guess it is. All right, that is not going anywhere. So I'm going to wipe the rest of this evaporust out of here. Make sure that's all nice and clean. Then the next thing we'll do is I have a new grommet here that replaces this kind of old crusty one. That goes where the accelerator pump lever enters the top chamber here. So let me just see if I can't push that down in there. Helps to use a pick. There, you can see hopefully down in here that is set in place. So now I'm going to need to fish out my accelerator pump lever. Yeah, if you don't remember yesterday, this was all rusty and nasty, and now it looks really good. So glad that cleaned up well. So this goes in this direction. You'll kind of flip this around. It ends up in this direction, but to get it in there, you come in this way. It's a little tricky, especially not trying to get that little grommet pushed out of there too. So you got to kind of be a little careful. There we go. Then you want to push it in a little bit because it's going to go over in this hole. This is where the top of the accelerator pump sits. So get it over into that hole and then set it in place. And so let me go fish out the screw and the plate that goes over this. This just goes right over the top here. We find the screw. All right, that operates really well. One thing I should probably do is go grab a little bit of air and I'll blow out some of these passages here. All right, I went ahead and pulled everything out of the evaporust there. Got everything kind of blown out, got all the passageways blown out with a little bit of air here. And so I think these are all good and clean. Everything seems to be working good. Got that restaked. So let's kind of pull this kit out and we can start reassembling everything. And so I got all the old parts over here out of the way so I don't get them mixed up. So let's grab these kits. So I got the deluxe kit, which includes the float bowls, a new plunger for the accelerator pump. It has this spark valve, though mine does not have a spot for the spark valve. I think it goes right here, but it's not threaded in there at all. And so this spark valve will not be used. So I'm going to set that aside. And then it's got the float stop there. Has new springs for the accelerator pump. Right there, and then also a new spring which is for the automatic choke, and so we'll be using that new one. Has an extra little gasket. I don't think I need this gasket, but we'll set it aside just in case. So that's comes with the deluxe kit, and so this is the normal kit here. I'm going to pull this out. So it comes with an assortment of gaskets. We'll need to, depending on your model, there may be a few different gaskets that you'll need. And so we're going to set some of these aside. Looks like we've got multiples. That's excellent. Then we've got the plunger for the automatic choke. This is a little bit of the measurement guide. This is for the choke thermostat, a gasket for that. Also gasket for the choke thermostat. Here is the needle and seat that'll replace. It's a little bit different. The one that I had, as you can see, has a much longer nozzle there, and so I'm hoping that, yeah, so this little piece here is what hooks to the fuel line. Yeah, not sure exactly what that's for. I don't have a comparable piece. This here is the gasket. It goes, I believe, right there. Or, excuse me, it's this one right here. Bam, so that's the little gasket for the needle. Here is the plunger. And it does come with a new accelerator pump lever grommet. So that's kind of nice. I'm actually going to save that because I've got a bunch, as you saw. And then it also has a new ball, new check ball as well. And then here is the power valve assembly. Comes with a tiny little spring. And that's everything. So, one thing you will need to reuse, and I'm not sure, can't really see the size of this jet here, but you will need to reuse your jet, so you want to make sure that this is really cleaned up before you reinstall it. All right, so let's start getting this assembled. First thing we'll do is we'll put the main jet in, and now that goes next to the accelerator pump in the bowl here, kind of right there. Going to need a set of needle nose pliers to get that down in there. You don't need to crank it down too tight. You don't want to bend any of the brass. So, all right. Next, we'll put in the power valve here, or the power jet. So you have a tiny little spring here. And so this one is going to be kind of tricky. Power valve kind of goes in this spot right here. So with the power valve kind of put together here, you want to probably do this upside down, would be my bet. That's what I'm going to do here. Hold it with a pair of needle nose. Try to fish that down in there. Then take your little homemade power valve screwdriver and screw it in. Again, you don't want to be terribly rough on it. It is brass. Now with that power valve in, next thing I'm going to do is put the needle in there. It's a 5/8. Has a little washer. I don't know if you saw that. There's a little kind of metal washer. And just get that on there nice and snug. There we go. It'll go in there. That's for the fuel line. So now we need to get this piece put together. And so this is where the actual accelerator pump goes. And so you've got the cup, the spring, and then the actual rod. And so the cup fits over this. You want the concave portion will end up facing down essentially. But that should just slip over there, just like that. And then back to the bowl actually, because we do need to put on the floats. And so the floats will, you have your little rod here that kind of goes across here. And then these set down in that little passageway. So you can kind of see how that sits in there. There we go. That's all the way seated now. See that right in there. and then your little piece here sits right across. You want to have this be a little bit above the surface of the bowl there. So as you can see there, this is just a little bit, this might be a little hard to see, maybe if I add a little contrast, but you can see that that just sits right above the bowl there. So that when you put the two halves together, that should just press and keep everything nice and tight. Now to adjust the floats, what you want to do is, so you'll probably be able to see that just a little bit, but they hang out a little bit past the main bowl assembly there. You can kind of see that. So when this is all the way out, you want to make sure that that is actually level. You might want to make sure the arms aren't touching anywhere, and you don't want to bend the actual floats up and down. You want to bend the tab that presses against the needle in here. And so I think what I'll do here, take this spring out. And actually take the floats out. I'll bend that with it out just so make it a little more accurate. I think you can see there, those floats are just right at the top. So I think that's adjusted well. All right, so next thing is we'll get the automatic choke situated. And so that's what this is here, this little coiled bimetal piece. And the way this goes together, there's a little gasket that goes around like this. And this piece kind of goes in here. So you'll be able to see here that this piece sits like that. Can only go one way. And so that way you know that it's in there properly. But then, so this will just drop down this direction. So you have this whole assembly together, and then effectively this will close the choke. And you have a little bit of adjustment, so you can see, you know, the choke is open, but then as that heats up, it releases the choke. And so you can adjust that. We do need to put this little gasket here. And again, this can only go one way. So it's a matter of figuring out the way that it goes, getting it on there. And then this little piece holds it all together there. All right, get these on. Now I actually think there's a piece missing as well here. I think there's a hose that connects here. What I've been doing is so far I've just been capping it off. Now I don't know exactly how that's going to affect the choke, but I think that introduces a vacuum link, which was part of my problem that I've been having. So I think this is all together. The last piece, and you have to kind of be careful with this then, is the ball and check valve. And so I've got it cleaned out really well. It came out after cleaning, and so right here is where the check ball goes, and then the weight goes in over the top of that. Now with the check weight and the check ball in there, you're going to want to take your accelerator pump here and test to make sure everything's flowing in there. And so I just have a little bit of mineral oil there that I'll just dribble a little bit down into the accelerator pump chamber there. And then you should be able to then take your accelerator pump, and then you can kind of see it already coming out of the check ball and check weight slot there. But if you just kind of get your accelerator pump down in there, you'll see as you press, that'll come up. Yeah. And so that looks like that little passageway is nice and clear. And then you should be able to then also press down on that, and then that's not going to go at all. And so, yeah. And then this lever here fits over the pump there. So let's see if I can't, I might need to take this off actually so that I can wiggle the lever around. So let's do that. Got a little over anxious putting that on there. Get that lever kind of out of the way. And let's just slide right in there. There we are. So you can see that's all, once that goes down into the bowl there, that'll seat real nice. All right, now that that's all put together, we got both halves here pretty much complete. Obviously, we need to put the throttle butterfly on there, but we can do that afterwards here. And so first thing we need to do in order to put this together is get our gasket. And so I think the best way to do this is put it on the top half, and you'll be able to see how everything kind of slides together. That way you know you've got it oriented properly. Then also you probably want to spray a little bit of white lithium grease onto your accelerator pump plastic. Gasoline doesn't have a lot of lubricating effects, and so you want to make sure that that's lubricated and flows freely in the accelerator pump bowl there. And so now we'll just go ahead and flip this over. And then you want to be careful with the bowl. You don't want the check weight and check ball to fall out, but you just kind of get all your power valve and the jet center in there. Kind of get that all put together. Crank on this accelerator pump. That'll help that get that down in there, because you want it down in that bowl there. But yeah, just press those together. Make sure your gasket looks good, and then we'll get some of the screws on here. And by some, I mean 5 out of the 6 it's supposed to, since mine didn't have a 6th screw here. What I would do is just kind of tighten them down a little bit. Once you've got all of them in, kind of go around in somewhat of a cross fashion. That way it kind of gets sealed evenly around the bowl there. Want to make sure kind of get your accelerator pump down there. Make sure that's seems to be going pretty good. All right, there we are. And so next thing we'll do is we'll flip this over here, and we'll get the accelerator butterfly put on as well. All right, with the accelerator butterfly, again, you have a gasket, and you want to try to make sure you get that oriented properly so that it'll go on there. And then the way, so how do you tell here the accelerator, controls here go over on the opposite side from where your fuel inlet is. So let's get this situated properly, and then we'll get our 3 screws in. When you're doing this, you'll kind of see there's some passageways, and the way the gasket is, these 3 holes will line up that allow for air to pass through there. And so you want to make sure that lines up really well. So it should be pretty easy. This one basically only can go one way. Get that down and tight. There we go. That looks really good. Now with the 2 halves together here, what we're going to want to do is get the couple of these levers on, and some of these parts you'll want to kind of wait to put on. That way you can do this. So this one here, this is your kind of your choke plunger, and so this will kind of finagle in there, and then you've got your plastic that comes with the kit that just kind of sits in there, and then put a screw on, and then also your spring. And so this spring has a little end and big end. The little end kind of goes in that slot there, and then we can kind of put this over. You want to make sure that that plastic doesn't get pinched in a spot it's not supposed to. So just get a couple of these screws cinched down. When you tighten it down, just double check that plastic little membrane there is not wrapped up somewhere. And then there, that's how that assembly goes. So with that now on there, we can then focus our attention on the other side and get the return spring for the throttle situated. And so you've got this spring and the bushing. So this bushing kind of has a flat end, and then the spring has kind of a short end and a long end. And so this flat part is going to go with the short end there. Now how this works is there's kind of a slot, right, a little groove on this lever here, and then a protrusion on the throttle body here that that spring hooks onto. And so we'll need to get this lever on. That goes onto the accelerator pump lever there, and then this goes up through there. Now this is going to sit on there in this fashion, but of course we've got to get this spring on there first. So we'll set that aside a little bit. We'll put our spring on with that flat side facing out, and then we'll get this on here, and then we'll get the spring on there, and then we can just get a pick and just kind of holding that plate down, should be able to kind of pry this up and over there. Again, I have a little washer and the nut that goes on the end to hold that all on. There, and then you can kind of test, see how that works, and you can see throttle returns nice and smooth. So last thing I suppose is just getting the idle air control, which is right here. And so the way you want to do this is kind of bottom it out. Good starting point anyway. This is just bottom it out, and you can see the needle coming out right there. And so then just back it off. We'll go, there's a half, 1 1/2. So that's a good starting point. We can tweak that a little later. The other thing as well is the idle control for the throttle goes right there. This will have to be adjusted as well. This just kind of sets what the idle is, you know, the position of the throttle essentially at idle. You know, it's the stop essentially. So that'll, depending on how far you've got that in, you'll see it'll move the throttle. So that we'll have to fiddle with as well once we get it back on the engine. So we'll start it out just a touch and start with that. I think that pretty much gets it all put back together. Obviously there's a few gaskets once we get it on the car that we'll go over, but right now I'm going to hold off and getting it on the car until the next episode. I have a few things on the engine I want to do, compression test, probably leak down test. I want to pop the valve covers off, kind of take a look at what's in there. I'm pretty sure there's an oil leak coming from one of the valve seals. That's why it kind of blew smoke. So I want to wait until the next episode to do that before I actually put this on there and fire it up. So I really appreciate you watching. If you're here for the first time, consider subscribing. You can always follow me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Weekend Wrench Turner. Thanks for watching. Keep on wrenching.